Now, one effective strategy for teaching grammar is using games. With my middle school students, especially those at low proficiency levels, I almost always incorporated a game into the lesson, like 5 or 10 minutes. I taught a group of students who were low achieving. Their test scores were between 10 and 30 out of 100. And while this wasn't true for all of them, many had lower intrinsic motivation for learning English compared to higher achieving students. Games are a great way to get students actively engaged in the lesson. Even the shy students participate and get involved, and games work just as well with adult English learners too. Now, one thing to note is that the purpose of using games is not typically to introduce new concepts, but to reinforce what has already been taught. They're rarely used to teach new grammar rules or vocabulary, but they're excellent for practice and review. Now, using games in the classroom offers several key benefits. First, games make language practice enjoyable and engaging, which can lead to better retention of new concepts. By creating a relaxed, non threatening environment, games reduce anxiety and allow students to feel more comfortable using the language, so they lower the affective filter. It also increases student talk time. Games often involve active participation, giving students more opportunities to speak and practice in a natural setting. It can also be a chance to informally assess students. We can observe students' language use during games. We can also provide valuable insights into their progress without the pressure of formal testing. So, this could be a form of formative assessment. It motivates students. Games usually tap into students' intrinsic motivation, making learning feel more like play and less like work. It involves everyone in class. Games are inclusive, encourage participation from all students, even those who might usually be more reserved or hesitant to speak. Now, here are some of the things to consider when using games and ask these questions to yourself. So, what specific point are you aiming to introduce or practice with this game? Make sure the game aligns with your lesson objectives, whether it's grammar, vocabulary, or communication skills. Are the instructions and rules easy to follow? You may want to provide clear, simple instructions to avoid confusion and keep students focused on the activity. How about the level? Does the level of difficulty match the class's skill level? So ensure the game is challenging enough to engage students, but not so difficult that they become frustrated. Does the game require maximum student engagement? The more involved your students are, the better, right? So you might want to choose the games that encourage everyone to participate. Oh, this is important, right? Will this game cause classroom management issue? So consider how you're going to manage the class during the game to keep it fun but controlled, ensuring the activity stays productive. The first game I want to introduce you is Swatted, a fly sweater game. A fly sweater game is a fun interactive activity that incorporates body movement and can be used to reinforce both grammar and vocabulary. I use this game for adult language learners and it works just as fun as for younger students. Now, first, you need to divide a class into two groups. Then, you will have each group line up. Now, if you have a large class, you can also skip this process and ask one of the students in each group come up to the front. Now, next, you will display two sentences on the board. One sentence with correct grammar and the other one with an error. Okay, and then the two students at the front of the line race to swat the correct sentence using their fly sweater. Okay, the first student to swat the correct sentence earns a point for their team. Now, to check their choice, you could ask the student to explain why they chose that sentence and what made the other one incorrect. Now, after the round, the first two students go to the back of their respective lines, and the next students take their place, repeating the process with new sentences. Now, this game can be adapted for various levels and topics, such as identifying correct verb form, vocabulary words, or sentence structures. So let me give you an example. Now imagine your students have just learned about comparatives and superlatives and you want them to practice, all right? So you could have them form two groups and line up. Now, if you're comfortable using technology, display two sentences on the board. And then the student who selects the correct sentence will earn a point for their group. Now, to check my students' understanding, I would ask the student to explain the reason behind their choice. For example, I could ask, Tom, can you explain why you chose the sentence on the right? What's wrong with the other sentence? So, this encourages students to think critically and explain their reasoning, making sure that they're not just guessing but thinking about the grammar rule. Now, this game can also be used for practicing vocabulary. Place several vocabulary words on the board or desk, then describe one of the words without saying it directly. Students take turns coming up to the board and sweating the word that matches the description. All right, let's move on to using board games. Now, using board games is another great way to help students use grammar and vocabulary in fun way. Now, these are two sample board games that you can use with your students, and these examples come from American English Activate Games for Learning American English. That's a 118-page document filled with high quality games that can be easily incorporated into your lesson. Now, even if you're not specifically teaching ESL, these board games can be adapted to suit your students' learning goals. Now, for example, the board on the left focuses on practicing the have you ever phrase, right? Students roll the dice, land on a space, and they must read the question on the board. Now, they respond using either I have or I have never. So, this is a great practice for the have past participle structure, a common challenge for non native English speakers. Now, the other board game targets vocabulary usage. So you can customize it by adding words your students have been learning, especially words they struggle within a text. In this version, students roll the dice and create a sentence using the word they land on. Uh, and a variation could involve having them explain the meaning of the word instead. So these types of board games engage students in a fun, interactive ways while reinforcing language skills. But you don't always need to create the board games yourself. After playing a few games with pre-made boards, you can let your students create their own. So this gives them ownership over their learning, helps reinforce the content, and allows them to practice language skills in a fun, interactive way. Now, what if you forgot to bring dice to the classroom? No problem, because you can easily use common classroom tools. Try using numbered cards, a spinner, or even a pencil. Now, interestingly, a pencil has six sides, just like a dice, so you can number them and use it as a substitute. While I enjoy using games in the classroom, there are certain factors I consider when selecting or designing a game, especially for English learners. Now, class size, student proficiency levels, and language goals are often the primary considerations when teachers choose games, right? However, one additional suggestion is using the game that students can incorporate four language skills. These are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So students can have a well-rounded learning experience. For example, when I was a university supervisor, one teacher candidate used a mind game in his lesson with an adult ESL learners. So he would have one student come up to the board, uh, show them a word, and then ask them to act it out using body movement without speaking. So the rest of the class had to guess the word based on the miming. Now, this game lasted about 20 minutes and it was quite fun. But there were a few ways it could be improved to ensure students used all four language skills. So, how would you modify this game so students can practice listening, reading, writing, and speaking? Now, additionally, how would you extend the focus beyond the individual words to reach the sentence level, making the activity more communicative and interactive?